All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today, you're clicking on the second part of a series where we're talking about the Division 2 compared to the Division 1 in terms of rewarding systems and how both games evolved and how the Division 2 is evolving. And in my opinion, the Division 2 is getting to a place where it's actually a better game than the Division 1. Saying this is really weird because I remember about a year ago, I said the Division 2 didn't even have much on the Division 1 so far. But over the course of the past few months, with a few changes, if you look at the cumulative, transformations that the Division 2 has gone through, I think it's actually made some really serious changes. And this is important, especially for a community of gamers who we've played both games from a very long time. In my last video, I spoke about the loot. I spoke about the loot quality, the loot acquisition, and in my estimation, hands down, the Division 2 basically wins. And if you also want to even compare the lifespan of both games and when these were implemented, even in the Division 2, I think we got a better, implementation of these loot systems in the Division 2 than we did in the Division 1. Today, I want to talk about, mechanics, systems from the Division 1 and how some of them made their way into the Division 2 and some of them were actually improved upon. So this video is probably going to take a much longer time scale. So if you're driving, just, chill, listen. If you're at work or whatever it is, probably going to be one of those videos where I just rant about some of these issues. But if you haven't played the Division 1, hey, still go ahead and just listen just for the heck of it, because there might be a few things that will give you a little bit of perspective about how this game has basically, come from where it's actually come from. So let's go ahead and kind of get back into the picture. 2016, the Division 1 came out. Many of us were in different times in our lives. I mean, we can all say that it was a very, different life stage for most of us as gamers, most of us as dads, most of us as family folk, because the Division's audience is made up of mainly older guys and gals that, enjoy the game. And if you even think about how much your life has changed from then to now, I think that's also a big, huge factor in the way you approach the Division 2. It's impossible to think that your mindset from the Division 1 and your mindset from now are the same. So when you first saw the Division 1, you were in awe. You basically fell face flat and you didn't know what to do with yourselves. It's the same feeling that many of us had. And so when the Division 2 came out and it didn't have a lot of some of the elements that you had in Division 1, you were not necessarily in the mood to look at this and be like, yeah, this is really exciting, because you had already, experienced a lot of those exciting themes from the first game. But the Division 2 came out with, in their minds, the developers' minds anyways, a fresh take on the franchise. Now, I don't necessarily know why the direction of the game went this way, but I do know one thing. If they had repackaged the Division 1, they would have gotten criticism on that level like, hey, they didn't even make anything new, because that's basically what gamers would do. I played FIFA for many iterations. One of the biggest criticisms that made me basically drop that game was the game basically got no major changes over time. Even till date, they recycled the very same game. And many people who play 2K, even NHL, and even the NFL games that are made by a lot of these gaming companies will tell you that the iterations are mostly similar. And so the Division, I think, as Ubisoft usually likes to at least push the envelope, they decided to push in this direction. Initially, the direction was absolutely flawed. That is something that we cannot in any way overstate. I can tell you that the very first iteration of the Division had some issues. But over time, what have we seen? These issues have basically started to get minimized because changes have been coming into the game and new ways of actually doing things are now being implemented. And one of them, one very huge significant one, is the way that our gear systems work. If you played the Division 1, there are a lot of talents from the Division 1 that were really interesting talents. Talents that could heal you on kill, talents that could basically change the way your game and your team plays, ultimates that could give you huge buffs and protection, that could basically res you on demand or even automatically. You even had some that could increase the RPM of your team. Those were ultimate skills that you could proc, and your team will basically go berserk and have this crazy boost of RPM and damage increase that was very fun to be able to use for a very short period of time. These things made the Division 1 very solid. There's no doubt that you could say the Rainbow, which is basically popping all of the different alts at the same time, was kind of cheesy but fun at the same time. I think the developers moved that away from the game and replaced it with the specialization trees, which at first were kind of confusing and a little weird to work with. Having done a lot of specialization videos, I can tell you that the specializations have actually improved from where they were. I mean, they could still be better, don't get me wrong, but there have definitely been improvements on how the specializations do work in the game. But largely, I don't think the specialization trees were designed to directly take the place of the alts. I think they were there to allow for the player to actually creep up in power and also be able to influence the group in more ways than a single alt that had a huge cooldown. If you wanted to actually go by those paradigms, we have systems in the Division 2 that can do almost everything that I've just mentioned. In fact, when the Division 1 reached its peak, it was the classified gear sets that closed out the game. And many people have said, we would love to see classified gear sets in the Division 2, but honestly, the classified gear sets of the Division 1, they come nothing close to some of the gear combinations that we have in the Division 2. This is a very huge fact. In fact, just lately, the Scorpio exotic was put into play, and that thing has basically synergized some of the major damage dealing systems or group synergy systems that you had in the Division 1 and has scaled it into one single exotic weapon. Now, yes, this came in at a very late time in the game, but for those who were looking for something that could actually, do Predator's Mark or whatever, now you have the Ridgeway's chest piece and you also have the Scorpio exotic, and if you wanted to combine them in a crazy status effect build, you could basically do a very good job and still relive those kinds of memories or fantasies from the Division 1. It's not the exact same thing, obviously, but I think it works, and the game is defining its direction and making its own direction look very good along the way. The Division 2 will never be Division 1. I think I had to come to reconciliation with that in order for me to be able to appreciate a Division 2 for the game that it actually is, because I realized that every time we actually juxtapose both games, there's a huge contrast. It's like they continue to be incompatible over and over again. Why this is the case, perhaps a change in direction of the game, perhaps a change in the game director, but I've seen a lot of different elements that really say, well, if the Division 2 was not named the Division 2 and it was its own unique game, would it still be a good game? And the answer is yes. In fact, it will be a great whatever game it is. I think the Division being slapped upon it was just one of those sales tactics, and I think Assassin's Creed is a testament to that. A lot of old school Assassin's Creed gamers have said they just don't feel like the Assassin's Creed games that we've had since Origins through Valhalla feel like Assassin's Creed games. I think this is probably what we're experiencing in the Division. We have mechanisms that seem to be similar, but at the same time in a very different game. So there's all of this huge contrast between player expectations, between developer delivery. And to find common ground, I think the approach of just looking at the Division for what it is might be the way to approach things. And then when you think about other systems, when you think about gear sets, when you think about brand sets, you also, find something that's quite unique and cool. And that is that brand sets actually do have gear set equivalents. So the way brand set mechanics work basically, calls for you to be able to take these brand sets and look through their own little talents and their own little skills, and you're able to put them together in a 3-2-1 combination or 2-2-2 or whatever it is that works for you. And many people, enjoy this, mechanism of building. But in some cases, some people don't enjoy it. They basically don't like the complexity that comes with it. On the other hand, most of the gear sets actually allow for you to make similar builds, in some cases better, that allow for you to play a slightly different play style but achieve similar results, but in this case are more simple. Examples of something like this would be in the skill category. In fact, one possible example that you can actually take a look at is in our skill build with the turret and the drone. For the turret and the drone build, if you don't want to use the Murakami and the Wyvern and the Hana U combination, you can just use hardwire gear set. 4 pieces of hardwire. You can throw memento in there. You can use whatever chest piece you want, and you'll be getting some really cool skill cooldowns while at the same time getting a lot of efficiency for the work that you're putting in and for the skill investment that you have. This is not out of the question for you to be able to build in multiple ways and gain some really serious build diversity that is not only unique to you, but unique to your own play style and the way that you want to approach the game. I genuinely think this is a better way to do things. And I genuinely think that it has actually come into more fruition since they've unlocked the gear. If you guys remember in the past, we had some brand sets that didn't have some pieces, like Wyvern did not have a chest piece. But over time, these changes got made, and now you can actually get the pieces of the gear in any combination that you want. And also, the developers saw the uniqueness of the Division 1's gear system and implemented in the Division 2 by actually taking all the gear and actually simplifying them to having core attributes and attributes. In the Division 1, we call these the major and the minor attributes. It's basically the same thing. And in gear sets, they made them much more simpler. So when you actually go back and examine everything, I think they've taken some of the good aspects from the Division 1 and put it in the Division 2. This is why I say that the Division 2 has finally come to the point where I can comfortably say the game is actually in a better state than the Division 1, because I feel genuinely that the Division 1 was cut short in its lifespan because of the way the publisher approaches things. The Division 1 should have been or could have been expanded upon, no doubt. But to go ahead and try to do a sequel, maybe because the player base was already so small and dwindled down, there was probably no way to sell more DLC in a profitable way to justify making them. I don't know what the constraints could have been, but if you're going to house 400 or 500 or 700 developers, then you better come up with a very good way of being able to churn out profit. So for those who are saying it would be nice if Massive doesn't make another Division game, I hear you. I think I see the reasons behind that. If a smaller team were to make the Division, I think they'll probably do a better job because they won't have all the constraints that a huge studio like Massive has to try to make money. But here's the thing. Are they going to be able to pull in the quality that a big team like Massive is able to put in? So all of these questions really stem to the complexity of game development. I saw a comment the other day talking about how, game development isn't as difficult as some other enterprises. And I still disagree with that because some other enterprises have more predictable outcomes. Game development suffers a lot from its unpredictability and all kinds of other factors that come with it, especially with the audience being in a position where they may not accept your product, depending on the landscape and depending on other games. So when you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, has the Division 2 come a long way? I think so. You might disagree, and I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Do you think the game has come a long way, or do you think the game is still away from what the Division 1 was? And please, don't let the snow be the only metric by which you judge the Division 2. If there was snow in the Division 2, you would probably be praising it. Just take it, for the game that it is and the setting that it is. What do you think genuinely about this iteration in its current state? I'll talk to you all in another video. Thank you very much for your time and audience. Hopefully we'll see in another one. Peace.